everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Dance Talk Realness, a podcast where we discuss all nuances concerning education and dance, because a dance experience is an experience worth talking about. I'm your host, Truly B, here with my awesome, as always, co-host, Daryl P. Hey, boo. And today we are joined by choreographer extraordinaire. Yes, I'm giving you all the shout outs for that because you're absolutely amazing. This is Kimmie Dobbs Chan. So yay, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Definitely thank you for taking out the time to be here, because I know you always have a very busy schedule. And we are operating at a time of day where we are all just kind of like, coffee would have been a great decision. But let's jump straight into it. And if you would be so kind as to just share your background in dance, kind of what led you through dance up to where you are now, and just help our audience get to know you.
Sure. Well, right now I am co-artistic director and choreographer for Deviated Theater, and also studio director for Enoch Chan Photography. So wearing multiple hats, but you know, as artists, that's what we do, right?
True.
So with Deviated Theater, we different styles of dance to tell stories, and I've coined the term dance opera because it's telling stories through movement, just like opera tells stories through song. And we basically use fantasy, so we take you to other worlds in order to explore concepts that maybe are harder to talk about directly, if that makes sense. So by like transporting you to a different world, we can really talk about the human condition in a way that's a little bit less confrontational, if that makes sense. So it's inviting and, brings an element of curiosity that draws the audience on a journey, so then we can talk about real things without just hitting them up front with it. So how did I get here as choreographer? That's a good question. So I guess I started dance as a kid, and I was in a dance competition school. So Fran's Studio of Dance is where I did a lot of my dance, and then I got into ballet, and I was taking drop-in classes at the Kirov Ballet in Washington, D.C. We're so lucky we live in this area that has such awesome dance, and I hit a really interesting split in my journey right at the beginning of high school. So I was actually accepted into North Carolina School for the Arts for their high school program. And at the same time, I also was cast in the Radio City Christmas show in Chicago. So I had this choice: do I go down the ballet path and, go to the performing arts high school and pursue that contemporary concert work, or do I go down the musical theater road? And I chose the Radio City show because it's interesting because I don't think of myself necessarily as a typical musical theater person, but I love the creation of different worlds, and I love stage production, and just to be in front of a huge audience like that was a huge opportunity at 14. It's so funny when you look back, right? I wonder, did I have to choose? I don't know. Is that something my parents were like, choose? But could I have done both? I don't know. That's always the question you ask looking back. So I definitely, wonder what could have happened if I had trained, harder in high school. I'm getting off on a tangent.
No, it's fine. We do it all the time.
But okay, so then it was kind of interesting because my high school experience was our dance school was really pushing towards musical theater, and a lot of my peers were booking Broadway shows. And I never booked anything after that Radio City show, but I had my dance partner got into Music Man, and it was this awkward position where my dance studio was expecting me to book something, which was a lot of pressure. So then they stopped putting me in their competition pieces because they were expecting me to leave. It was so much pressure that I basically burned out and stopped dancing before high school was over. So then I went to college for kinesiology. I actually first I got into the Gallatin School at New York University, and I went to New York for the first 2 years of college, and I was still burned out from dance, so I didn't apply to the dance program. But the Gallatin School lets you design your own major, and so I was putting together a major on the integration of mind and body in performing arts and in health. And of course, I moved up there August 2001, which means I was downtown on September 11th, down about a mile away from the World Trade Center. And that was an experience. Oh my God. That has, looking back, has shaped a lot of my choreography. Long story short, after 2 years in the city, I was still healing from that experience and moved back to Maryland. And that's when I got the kinesiology degree at University of Maryland. And then I met my now husband, Enoch Chan, who was a dance photographer, is a dance photographer, but at the time I got to tag along on a lot of his dance photo shoots. So I remember he was photographing Bosma dance at Dance Place in DC, and I got to tag along in a dress rehearsal. And then I was sitting there in the audience watching their dress rehearsal thinking, what am I doing? I should be dancing. And finally that spark was like back, and within a year or two, Enoch and I started just, choreographing our own productions, and that was it. And that was, let's see, 2008 is when we choreographed our first production, and then we were just running forward, just getting back on track with the dream of producing. So
I literally knew none of this history, and I have known you for a few years now.
Yeah.
I guess this doesn't come up in just regular conversation. Like, you kind of have to ask pointed questions to kind of get to this type of information. So
it's true. Yeah. I think it's interesting. Like, I'm a person. I kind of I like to hide a little bit. You know what I mean? So that nothing can disrupt whatever my creative process is. Mm-hmm. So I do get on a day-to-day basis get nervous about people like kind of probing me for information, or you know what I mean? You kind of want to be left to your own device.
Definitely understand that.
Yeah.
And I think it's also just a general pressure from society to hide your inner being as well. You know what I mean? Because we're always worried about fitting in to where, whatever your workplace is, you're trying to fit in and just go with the flow. And so I think in that way you can also inadvertently hide kind of.
Yes, like you have to have the face that you're supposed to show.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah. I think it's interesting to hear just, and would want to hear more from others, the stories of how people who left the field of dance and then had that spark and came back, right? Because I feel like that happens quite a bit, especially for people who, unfortunately, like I didn't start dancing until high school, until like I was a junior in high school, and loved it so much and did it for 2 years. And then went to college and was like, I'm going to be a health administration major. And it wasn't until I took a dance class and started being in some other people's like senior pieces and being in some of the professor choreography that people were like, well, why aren't you a dance major? And I thought, because I'm like, why would I do that? And it takes a lot of like just different shifts right before you're like, well, yeah, this is where I need to be. This is what I want to do. But it's interesting how we have those moments, and I wonder how many other people have had those moments, and even people who have not had those moments yet, where they're still kind of like, oh, I left it. It was something I did.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I do think that again, it's that conditioning. We all have an idea of what we think is possible for ourselves. And we're asked so young, what do you want to be when you grow up? And then you just come up with answers. And usually it's based off of what you see around you. And that's something I've always felt strongly is I always wanted to be a choreographer, but I didn't have words for it until I was finally doing it.
Mm-hmm.
I remember being a kid and I was the kid in the dance class off in the corner, like doing weird shapes and, well, like everyone else was going across the floor. I was like doing weird things um, and like fantasizing about creating like a humorous dance or something, putting something on stage. And so I think I knew at an early age that I wanted to choreograph, but no one ever pose that as an option.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Um, for some reason, there was that option of, be a Broadway dancer, but there was no clear path, no clear track to being a choreographer. And it was such a rare thing. I didn't even think it was a possibility until I had that spark, like you were saying, seeing someone else do it, and I thought, well, if they're here producing, I can totally do that. So that's the other part of it, right? Is you have to see someone else that gets you to believe that you can do it, and you have to be willing to let go of what your mind thinks you're supposed to do, and then listen to what your heart says, and then also see someone else who's opening a door or showing you what's possible in order to be courageous enough to try, I think.
Yeah. And I think now having both of your stories going through my head, I will say that even though there were times where you stepped away, I think that everything that you gathered while you were away from dance definitely shaped how you both are as artists now. And not, of course, not that you wouldn't be successful, but you wouldn't be who you are, and you wouldn't be the type of dancer that you are. You wouldn't be the type of choreographer that you are. You wouldn't have the same wealth of information if you hadn't taken that step back. So I do know, because similar to Daryl, like I started very late. I've actually never, like once I really was in dance, I never took a break. I've just been here. But I did that with music though. It was a span of years that I was like, I don't want to look at an instrument. I don't want to look at a piece of music. I don't want to be bothered. I'm done. I'm burnt out on that. And I think it started, that was 2001 or 2 when it happened. And it was, it was past 2007 when I finally was like, okay, I'm willing to really start looking at music again. But that background in music fed me as a dancer. So in a way, I didn't leave it completely behind, but I had to leave that portion for a while. And so you could argue that, you know, the bit that you already had, it followed you. It was still there. It still kind of had a little bit of sway. It just wasn't the focal point because that's not what you needed in the moment. And then when it was time to come back, now you're able to come back with a wider perspective, if that makes sense. Because I love when dancers have like background information that has absolutely nothing to do with dance, even though I think everything has something to do with dance.
Yeah.
Like something that's like people just not initially think of, like, wow, like we have Daryl and I have a mutual friend who her background is definitely in science. I have another that I know, her background, she's definitely an engineer. And it's amazing how they work. And like now knowing your background, Kimmie, I'm like, it makes so much sense. I'm like, yes. I was like, this explains so much now. Like, yes. And so I love that because it gives this extra little oomph that other people don't have. It's what makes us us. Like my background as a musician, I know is a huge part of why I work the way I work. I know. I was like, and I would always joke that I was like, you know, I just could not get away from it. Like I tried my best, but I'm like, I'm still a musician. It's just my body's my instrument now. Right. I don't need the external instrument. I am it. So this is how I see music. And so the way I can hear music and the way I can see different movements, accenting different parts of it, I know everyone can't do that.
Right.
So it's really cool. And it took oddly a long amount of time for me to pick up on that I assumed everyone could do it. And I was actually in class in undergrad and I realized, I was like, everyone does not hear the music the same way I'm hearing it. Oh, wow. I was like, they really don't hear that. Like, this is crazy. I was like, y'all don't hear that? Okay.
Yeah, I can relate. I did play violin for 7 years, but I also grew up in a house full of musicians, and my dad and my brother had bands that were playing in the basement constantly. So I was just constantly surrounded by music, and I can relate to what you're saying with, you know, hearing it differently and then choreographing as if you're part of the music. Yes. Yeah, like you're another, you know, melody, you're another instrument. So,
yes.
Yeah, I can relate.
And I love to see it. And I can identify that when I see it in someone else's work.
Cool.
That I'm like, oh, they have an understanding of that music that
right.
I was like, I appreciate it. If no one else appreciates it, I appreciate it because I'm like, I hear what you did there. Yeah. So like I am looking at it and I hear what was happening. I'm like, oh, this is awesome.
Yeah, I do think that it is, you know, our journey away from dance that gives us the opportunity to then come in at a new angle sometimes. And I definitely felt that when I got back into choreography. I hadn't gone to school for dance. I had been away from dance for at least, you know, 7 or 8 years. And then I was just able to dive in and break all the rules and do whatever I wanted. I'm just going to, you know, create a show. And so, yeah, it definitely enriches who we are as an artist to step away from dance, because it's easy to get into the practice of the skill of dance, because that takes so much repetition, you know, to stay relevant as a dancer, that you can get lost in the practice without then saying anything of impact, if that makes sense. Just get caught in that what's the word? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
Get caught in like the mundane life of being a dancer.
Yes.
There's like I see like an avalanche, right? Like it's just like you just pick up like what everything else is happening, and there's no real innovation that's occurring because it's the flow. It's just going with the flow of like what is happening in the scene and in the skill that like I feel like, you know, for folks that have stepped away from dance, you know, you're not really concerned or worried about being in that flow for whatever reason, right? Like you're willing, you know, it's like our students, right? Like sometimes I enjoy, because a lot of my students are very, you know, I am their very first dance teacher, which I love. Because then it's like, you know, when I give them something to do, they're not so much of like, how can I do 15 turns and 12,000 leaps across the floor to really show this movement? Sometimes I get something I'm just like, that is really interesting and really cool, even though they have no idea what they just did and how they just expressed something. But it's like, yeah, it's just great to see that creativity based on like real, rich, innovative movement. And it's not a pirouette to a split.
Yes. Yes.
But it just, to me, just seems really, authentic. And I think that, when you've stepped away, I think there's like an authenticity to like the practice and the movement that comes that is not there when you've been in it forever.
Absolutely. Yeah, I believe as dancers, we are super receptive beings. You know, we're literally copying movement, copying the style of different, you know, choreographers, and you know, you're taking on other people's essence or other people's energy, other people's signature, and it does help to step away from that and let that kind of filter out to figure out what your voice is as an artist. So I guess it looking back, I'm more appreciative of my time away. But it's definitely confusing when you think you're going to be something and you set yourself up to be something, and everyone in your world sets you up to know you as that thing, and then you break down and can't fulfill it, and so it's definitely confusing being in it, but I agree with you with, you know, in order to say anything authentic or find any authentic movement, you have to let go of what you know, let go of what you've been trained to do, and then to find something authentic, a lot of the times it's unconscious. Like you said, when they just do the thing that they don't even know what they did, but it's fascinating because it is authentic and there's something real about it and it draws you in. Yeah.
Yes. Well, that's actually a great spot. So before we let you go, Kimmie, I do also want to, if you are interested, open space to talk about your position with photography now, because that is an amazing transition. Like I have had the opportunity to have a photo shoot with Enoch and Kimmie, and it was fracking amazing. Loved every single moment. And so how has, because you're both within dance, so I know there's a role that has played, but also just like that shift, how's that been?
Wow. It's been fun. Every once in a while I stop and think, you know, this is such a better fit for me than what I was doing before, which was teaching a lot of Pilates. And it's fascinating to me that you can find your fit with, you know, being an artist with someone else who's an artist and kind of like fit under their umbrella. So, but as far as coming from dance, we get the opportunity with the photography. Right now we're doing a lot of boudoir portraiture, and so you're actually creating a safe space for clients. We have a lot of women clients to be embodied, you know, and to have a day where they connect with how they would like to be seen, where they reconnect with what their style is. And in doing that and asking those questions, they're giving themselves permission to follow what, you know, what lights them up, what sparks their heart, and to invest in themselves. And it's sorry, there's so many different things that I could say, but it's just been really fascinating to see how hard it is for a lot of women to actually take that time for themselves. And something about a portrait, it's something that grows in value over time, and one day we'll all be at the end of our life looking back, and what do you have are portraits. And who of us has a portrait of them, of ourselves where we really feel like the real us, and it's something that time goes by, 5 years goes by, and then another 5 years, and when are you going to stop and just get yourself a badass portrait where you feel like you get to be all the things? You're not just who you are at work, you're not who your friends think you are, you get to be all of it. Because I believe, each of us, we all have the legendary version of ourselves.
Oh, I like that.
There's the mundane, the person you have to be every day to kind of just get by, but then there's the, the legend inside. And like we were talking about earlier, we tend to dull that and kind of hide it as a coping mechanism to get through life and get through the day-to-day. But it's been a really special experience to actually hold space for people to reconnect with, that part of themselves. I think there's nothing greater than a person being able to be proud of who they are.
Yeah.
Because then they can really do what they're here to do in the world. Then they have the courage to go out and,
yes,
live their essence.
100%. You do create that space. 100. I can vouch. You definitely create that space. And to this day, like, there is one of the photos in particular that every time I look at it, I'm like, okay, but that's me. Okay. Now let's go. Let's go out here and just go do all the damn things we're gonna do. Like, let's go be great now.
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us again. If you will be so kind, I also have the email if you need me. But if you could list off all your social media for the people.
Of course. Yes, I have so many different accounts. Okay, so our two websites are deviatedtheater.org. So that's deviated, and then the word theater with an R-E at the end, .org, and then EnochChanPhotography.com. So ENOCHCHAN photography.com. And then I have 3 Instagrams, which is crazy. So my personal one is at Kimmie Dobbs Chan. And then we have the Deviated Theater is at Deviated Theater. And then Enoch Chan Photography is at Enoch Chan Photography. So.
Okay, awesome. Everyone needs to make sure that follow all the pages, because every single page is going to give you what you need for your life. Like, let me tell you, it will be an amazing experience across the board. Trust and believe.
So sweet.
Right. Thank you again for joining us. And thank you all for joining us here yet again at Dance Talk with Realness. If you have any questions, comments, observations, anything you want us to ask Kimmie, get some answers and bring them back to you, or have Kimmie back on, just drop us a line, let us know. Be sure to like, comment, follow, subscribe. And we look forward to bringing you some fresh new content next week. We'll see you then. Bye.